This week on Quality Digest Live, we look under the hood with Adrian Vido, Ford Motor Company's Global Manufacturing Quality Director.
Plus, improving the process of process improvement. That and more when we come back.
This week's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is TÜV SÜD-America.
Sign up for TÜV SÜD-America's free webinar, Forest Stewardship Council Chain of Custody, at www.tuvamerica.com/FSCCOC.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for October 12th, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, heads up. This Sunday, October 14th, is World Standards Day. World Standards Day is celebrated each year on October 14th. So this year, it's actually on Sunday, strangely enough, to pay tribute to the efforts of thousands of experts worldwide who collaborate within the IEC, ISO, and the ITU to develop voluntary international standards. Now, it's these standards that facilitate the trade spread and knowledge and disseminate technological advances. The theme of Standards Day this year is less waste, better results, standards increase efficiency. And I think that's the key word here is efficiency. The whole idea behind standards is to provide common specifications so that services and technology from different vendors all fit together. And this is actually a key thing that we talk about a lot in Quality Digest. We talk about a lot of different standards, particularly quality standards. But if it weren't for standards, we really couldn't have the type of global trade and global manufacturing that we have right now. In fact, we're going to be having a global manufacturer on the show here in just a little bit from Ford. Obviously, if it weren't for standards, Ford probably could not even function worldwide.
Sure, and you know, all of us here we're all quality professionals, so standards are kind of the what we do each day, right? But I mean, for everybody, whoever you are, as a consumer, as a child, as a baby, whoever you are, standards affect your life in a really important way. So take a few minutes this Sunday, take a break from watching football or raking the leaves or whatever the heck you're doing, and
think about those poor guys who helped create standards
out in Geneva.
Hoist a beer for one of those guys developing ISO 13486.
There's standards for beer, you know.
What's that?
There's standards for beer, you know.
Yes, there are standards for beer.
So thank ISO for making sure that beer.
The best standard is that it, tastes good.
It's cold.
And buzz.
And wet.
Okay, it's all about buzz.
All right, well, moving on. Thank you, Dirk. Also in the news this week, a recent study from researchers at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business indicates that, get this, bosses are important.
No way!
Who knew? Who knew? The study looked at more than 20,000 workers managed by nearly 2,000 bosses at a typical database organization over the course of 5 years, and they accumulated more than 6 million data points along the way during the course of the study. According to the data, replacing a poor boss with a good one raises productivity for the average team by 12%. Meanwhile, adding an extra person to the team only increases productivity by 11%. So, in essence, a good boss is worth more to the team than adding a whole other person and spreading out the work. That's pretty important. So what exactly, you might ask, what does a good boss do better than a poor one?
Spend.
Spend is a big thing. But there's even a bigger thing that a good boss does rather than a poor boss. And that's teach, impart wisdom. You think about it now, most of these bosses, and to be honest, what this article talks about is not top management. We talk about top management a lot here. This isn't about top management. This is about middle managers, people that are working with teams of 5 to 10 to 20 people. And what it shows is that teaching these skills is really, again, the most important thing. And it makes sense if you think about it. People at that level, managers at that level, generally rose through the ranks. They rose through the ranks. Why? Because they had core competencies in a lot of these areas, a lot of these strategic areas that really move the needle for the teams and for the company. So good bosses will take that knowledge, their special sauce as it was, and they'll teach that to their employees. Their employees will get the benefit of that wisdom, and then the company as a whole will be better.
Awesome.
So it makes a lot of sense.
So we have some value.
We have some, well, I don't know if
we think we have value.
I don't know if we teach that well, but I think that good bosses definitely teach well, and those middle managers make good companies great.
Okay, great. Well, hey, a little shout out to our friends at NIST, and a big congratulations to NIST David Wineland, who has been awarded the 2012 Nobel Prize in Physics, along with Professor Serge Harash of the Collège de France and École Normale Supérieure. Wineland was cited by the Nobel Committee for groundbreaking experimental methods that enable measuring and manipulation of individual quantum systems. So congratulations there to you guys and over at NIST.
To David, that's important stuff. I mean, he's a Nobel Prize winner. That's pretty impressive.
And actually, NIST, I think, unless I'm mistaken, NIST has actually had many of those. Yeah. And they do a lot of good work.
They do a lot of great work. So congrats to NIST, congrats to David Wineland.
Well, turning to one of this week's popular stories, no big surprise, it was A Look Under the Hood, The 4 Pillars of Ford's Quality Operating System, written by Ford's Global Manufacturing Quality Director, Adrian Vido. The 4 pillars that Vido discusses help Ford create a quality operating system that allows them to correlate internal data from every one of their plants and suppliers with, and this is the important bit, external customer data, in order to make sure that they're building cars that today's consumers want to buy. So we are very pleased to have Adrian Vido with us this morning via WebEx. Good morning, Adrian.
Good morning, fellas.
Actually, I guess it's probably afternoon your time there.
Yes, right now it's an afternoon. Yes.
Okay. Well, let's start off by talking about one of the pillars that you pointed out here, and I think this will help set the stage. One of the pillars, and I'm just reading from your article here, getting external information quickly to each and every plant that needs it. When internal data comes in from our technicians, the information arrives in the plant that builds that particular product within 24 hours. And that sounds like a pretty quick response time for issues that come in.
Absolutely, Dirk. And I must say and compliment you on your fabulous opening on 2 key points throughout this operating system I'm going to share with you today, and that is standardization and teaching. And specifically, in answering your question here on the information flow, it is vitally important that the information flow that comes from the field, be it surveys or our dealer technicians in our dealerships, is standard coming into the plants, so that in our manufacturing locations, so that there's no interpretation. The definition is clearly understood. We know exactly what the repair is or what the dislike is, and we can go collectively to work on that because of one thing: a standard dictionary, a standard language that we use for sharing information from the external customer to our internal problem solvers.
Well, that's interesting, Adrian. You mentioned that because voice of the customer, hey, it's always a topic that we discuss a lot here at Quality Digest, that our users and our readers are always interested in. So this voice of the customer data that you accumulate in so many different streams comes into your company in this way, and you talk about that common dictionary, that common language. So again, maybe break it down for us. How exactly do you carry that information on what they want to design, to manufacture, in all the different segments of your organization?
Very well, Mike. So first of all, the mantra we call is every claim, every day. So every issue, and you noted the 24-hour response, every verbatim, every claim that comes in from the outside field is reviewed and understood within 24 hours in our manufacturing locations around the world, regardless of where you ship to. From there, the information is then taken by the appropriate technical resources to understand, first and foremost, how did it leave the building? And that addresses the measurement system that we have in our plants, which is also standard around the globe, whether you're in a powertrain plant, an assembly plant, or in a stamping plant. So when the voice of the customer issue comes into a manufacturing location, if I could simply kind of put the flow, it goes to our technical leader responsible for that type of defect, be it chassis or be it powertrain or be it electrical. It is immediately within 24 hours assessed on how it left our building, and do we need to make adjustments in our own internal measurement system so as that we can stop those potential issues from leaving the building from then forward. That is kind of the interim containment action that the information flow allows us to respond to, again, within 24 hours. And by the way, Mike and Dirk, we measure how long it takes to put containment in place by adjusting our measurement system for every issue, every claim around the world.
So so it sounds like you've got a system in place that really sounds like empowers certain levels along the way to take action once these come in. I mean, you have a system in place that determines who's responsible for that particular issue. It's passed on to them, and it's their responsibility at that point to work on the containment. Do I have that right?
You're absolutely right. And you're now into the second pillar, actually, which is the infrastructure. Every manufacturing location is staffed with a cross-functional team that represents product design, advanced manufacturing, the manufacturing operations itself, and very importantly, our supply base. So when an issue comes in, that infrastructure, again, based on the nature of the issue coming in, it is clearly assigned with the right skill set team to go and address that, be it supplier, design, or manufacturing. Yes, that's the second pillar, having the right staffing levels with the right skill set inside the manufacturing locations.
Now, what about processes and tools? What type of, if you're, I know sometimes this stuff is sensitive, but as much as you can, what kind of specific types of processes and tools does Ford use internally in order to maintain quality and continuously improve?
So obviously the first and foremost is a standard inspection process where all inspection points within an assembly plant or an engine plant, transmission plant is all predefined by the standard holders like myself that need to be, first of all, understood, we call that competency, and then adhered to, which is adherence. And we assess ourselves to that standard inspection process on a quarterly basis on how well our voice of the customer requirements are understood, and secondly, adhered to. That's actually very simple.
You said something that was really interesting there. What do you mean assess yourself quarterly? And what are you assessing to?
So the standard inspection process is just one of many processes and tools that we have in our assembly plants, which is, by the way, the third pillar. It contains all the processes and tools in our plants that we expect our plants to fully understand and adhere to. Now, to that end, we have regional quality offices that, working with the operations, ensure both the competency and adherence, and we allow the plants to self-assess. We don't want to be police who give out speeding tickets for failing to obey the law, but we do have a self-assessment that the plants provide up to their regional offices, ultimately up to myself being the global office, on how well they understand what is being asked of them, first of all, and if they are not understanding of the process or the standard or the method, it is their opportunity to voice. Training is required, teaching is required, as you pointed out earlier, Mike. The second element of that is, if you understand it well, in fact, are you adhering to it very robustly? There is no subjectivity allowed here. The standards are very clearly written in what we expect all plants to follow. The importance of that is, clearly, if we have a best practice in a standard that we understand in one particular plant or region, if we were not standard to the level of specificity that we ask for, we would then not be able to share that same learning across all near 100 plants that we have in the globe overnight, basically.
Adrian, I'd like to jump in here with a question. I want to get back to customers for a minute. It's one of my areas of interest. You know, it's been, let's be honest, it's been a tough 4 or 5 years for the auto industry in the U.S. Sure. We're coming out of that era, I think, now, and certainly we've seen improvements, and Ford has seen improvements in, say, the J.D. Power and Associates initial quality studies. What do you attribute the fact that there's been better quality, there's been better receptivity amongst the consumers to the Ford brand? What do you attribute that to over the past couple of years?
Well, I wouldn't say that we haven't done this in the past, but what I think we have done more so in the last 5 or 6 years, primarily, and probably more so, is, you know, I mean, we've always, in all businesses, it's not just contained to automotive, we have typically engineering specifications. And sometimes, as we are, and I am one myself, a proud engineer, we have engineering specifications for producing the great products that we have. We always have in the 100-plus year history of Ford Motor Company. But there might be a time where we have a blind spot where the engineering specifications are not necessarily meeting the customer specifications. So I think to the point we alluded to earlier, relative to information flow and the voice of the customer in our first pillar, is I believe strongly and evidenced by the dependability scores we've received, initial quality scores and appeal study scores, is that we are adjusting, forever adjusting, our engineering standards to be more correlated and reflective of the customer standards. That's really where it all starts. And that's why we need the information flow to come back and feed in and say, are we making those right adjustments fast enough for what the consumer wants, i.e. the most recent trend obviously is around connectivity and technology advancement.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So obviously your responsibility is quality. When new product design starts to roll out and new features and so forth, does quality, or how does quality, I should say, get involved in the new product development? Are they in on the design phase in terms of feeding back, let's say, lessons learned into the design team? I mean, how does that work?
Very, very good question, and probably a twofold response. First and foremost, the answer is absolutely that quality is involved in the upfront decision-making of the product. And it's really not even, again, remembering the fact that it's not about engineering and what engineering or quality think. It's about having customer clinics with the field in the specific regions where their product will be sold, and actually getting some direct feedback from the consumer on some conceptual thoughts, designs, and sometimes physical properties around a product that we might have in the pipeline that we're considering. So that's one piece of it. The second piece is, obviously, as we go in the current model space, Dirk, we're learning things. And so the quality operating system that has the 4 pillars is, in fact, to your point, a closed loop process where it takes those very lessons learned, sometimes hard lessons learned, and feeds them back into the upstream development of product and development of process for incorporation so that we don't repeat the same mistake.
Well, great, and actually that sums it up sums it up really nicely. We got through the 4 pillars, and that it is actually a feedback process, which I think is what everybody realizes is what you need in order to maintain quality. Well, Adrian, I'm sorry, we've got to go now. I really appreciate you being on the show with us today and kind of going through the 4 pillars of your quality continuous quality improvement system there at Ford. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, fellas. It's been a blast to be on your show with the many viewers that you have. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian. Yeah, great stuff. You know, what he really got to there, I think, was the idea of continuous improvement. Even for a company like Ford, which is a quality-based company, long history, great history in the great American company. Come on, let's
I got my my Ford F-250 parked
right outside.
Right outside.
And you know, but the idea of continuous improvement, voice of the customer, continuous improvement, that it is a never-ending journey. I think sometimes we always think about the destination. We don't think about the journey. And quality is a journey. It's an ongoing journey. You never get there. You always have things you want to improve on. And I think Ford demonstrates that beautifully. And then Adrian, I think, embodies it, really, because they were very candid about that. And some of the engineering things that need to be tweaked up a little bit to align the engineering imperatives with what the customers wanted. And that's great stuff.
Well, I'm glad he mentioned the closed loop bit, because, I mean, that is, it doesn't do you any good to have the best quality control system in the world if you're still designing new products that haven't implemented your lessons learned, and you're introducing problems that never should be in there in the first place, because if you talk to your quality people, you know that, hey, you shouldn't do that. So, and it's not surprising. I mean, a company like Ford has got this dialed in, and they put out quality products.
They do. And again, it's seen. You can see it very clearly in the initial quality reports, the studies. I mean, it's been a progression. We talked about it on the show several times in the past couple of months, that we're seeing this momentum build now. And you know, hey, some other companies that have had very good quality reputations, Toyota and Honda, over the course of the last couple of decades have slept. And quite frankly, and in many cases, you see these reports saying that, you know, they're having problems, they're having recalls, right? We just saw 1.7 million vehicles, right, recalled from Honda the other day, right? I mean, so, you know, Ford, I think, is on the right track, and I think we see it here we're hoping that we're going to be talking with Ford a lot more going forward.
Yep, absolutely.
And bringing Adrian, maybe Benny Fowler again, maybe some other folks from Ford onto the show, talking to them about what they're doing and the quality processes they have.
Yep. Well, speaking of quality processes and so forth, you have an article.
And learning. I do have an article that we ran actually yesterday in Quality Digest Daily called Applying a Process Improvement to Training, which was written by Bill Hathaway, CEO of MoreSteam.com. And interesting piece, this one, applying process improvement to training, because it talks about blended learning, and it talks about how we as quality professionals do so much work to ensure that our processes and our companies are quality. Well, what are we doing to improve ourselves? What are we doing to improve the concept of training, right? Training is probably the number one thing that companies spend money on. It's certainly right up there as one of the key expenses. And do we do it well? Do we, and I think the line that Bill had in his piece was, are we eating our own cooking?
Right.
Are we really embodying that or not in what we do every day? So I want to talk a little bit about this story and get into this a little bit deeper with Bill Hathaway. Bill is going to join us here via Skype. Bill, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. Thanks, Bill, for joining us and coming on the show. I prepped a little bit about the article that you wrote for us that appeared in yesterday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about blended learning. Let's talk about benefits first and foremost. What are, within a blended learning environment, what specifically about that format really has specific benefits for quality professionals in particular?
Well, the driver really, I guess I'd say two drivers. The primary driver is that everyone faces is cost right now. So in every business, we're trying to find ways of getting things done at a lower expense rate. And training is a pretty expensive proposition. So the move towards blended training has really been a move to embrace technology to lower costs. And the second driver is to try to do that while also improving quality, so that the training outcomes are critically important. So it's not about just taking cost out of the training model, but how do we change the training model so that it works better, and also we reduce costs at the same time. And so it's been a very interesting evolution over the last 10 years as technology has allowed us to do more and more interesting things, but yet there's still certainly a lot of benefit to getting people together, and process improvement is a team sport. Mm-hmm. So training individuals to participate in that team sport requires also helping them to build connections with the people that they're going to be working with. That's hard to do solely using technology.
Well, you talk about costs, and certainly we know we've seen it that the costs of getting onto a plane and getting out to a training somewhere in Middle America, East Coast, West Coast, wherever it may be, it's pretty hefty. I mean, you're talking about a lot of money to gather people together to have face-to-face training, and there's certainly a lot of it's effective to do that, but you're right, the technology, and hey, we're seeing it right now. We have you here via Skype. Right. We're having a conversation with you. You're imparting learning, wisdom to us. So this is what it's all about. So, do you feel that, and you mentioned it, the technology really has brought us to the point where we can do this effectively. And do you feel like quality professionals really are embracing that more? Have you seen more of a rush to do that from your experience?
Well, absolutely. I see. As we move to more of an on-demand world, part of the emphasis now is I suppose thinking of learning in more practical, on-demand ways. So how do I find the information that I need right now? How do I build capability when I need it? And if you think in lean terms, which we like to think about lean learning, which is not learning about lean, but learning in a lean way, which means responding to pull signals, not training far in advance of use. I think of knowledge as kind of like inventory, really. So when you use a batch-oriented training system, which is essentially what classroom training is, and there are oftentimes good reasons to do that, really you're guessing about what people are going to need to know. So typically in that model, we're building capability that's like inventory that's going to sit in the warehouse, and it may be used or it may not be. And if it's not, we're going to suffer shrinkage and obsolescence, just like real inventory. So we're trying to think about ways that we can make the learning more responsive, more scalable, more flexible, so that we can deliver the building of capability at the point of use when it's needed, and not spend a lot of time, money, and effort training people to use tools that they may or may not ever use.
Well, let me jump in on that for a minute, because I think it beggars a point that we again chat about a lot here on the show, and it's the idea of the efficacy of Six Sigma, for instance. Now, fair disclosure, MoreSteam, one of the things you do is that you do offer learning, blended learning within the Six Sigma space. Master Black Belt training. Now, we hear from readers all the time that there's certainly a lot of concern, controversy, questioning about Six Sigma, and about the efficacy of all the tools. It can be a complicated tool set. It can bring a lot of information to people, some of whom will use some of it, some of whom won't use that much of it. So how do you respond to critics of Six Sigma and Six Sigma training?
Well, I think the best metaphor it's important to separate the tools, the practices from general management practice. And so the best metaphor that I can use is to think about accounting. Okay, so accounting is really useful and necessary. And in the absence of accounting, then if we don't have actual numbers, then we're guessing, I suppose. But yet lots of people don't use accounting properly. So it's sort of like saying that because of Enron, accounting is not a good practice. Well, the two are completely separate. So certainly there are people that have tried Lean Six Sigma that have not executed it well. It's not secret sauce. It's no kind of magic bullet. It requires management commitment. If you go back to Deming, that constancy of purpose has to be there for it to work. But it's like any other management practice or tool that cannot just be sprinkled across the organization and expected to work.
Let me ask you about design for Six Sigma, something we touched on yesterday real quickly, and that's an important part of this too, and where we're pushing the concept of Six Sigma a little further up into the stream, the workflow. How does design for Six Sigma fit into all this, and how would you advise people to look at DFSS?
Well, first of all, I think it's a huge opportunity. I think that even calling it Design for Six Sigma is a little scary to some folks. It sounds more complicated than it is. There have been criticisms that Design for Six Sigma somehow inhibits innovation and hampers creativity, and I think it's really misguided. Certainly, any kind of overbearing process can hamper creativity, but think about, I like to think about it in this terms. It's sort of like saying that Six Sigma applied to publishing a novel would somehow making sure there are no typos and that the pages are printed properly would detract from the quality of the written work. So, if you get your desk and your workspace organized, you can do better creative work. If you have a clearer understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish and what customers actually want, then you can do better, more relevant creative work. So the two really work hand in hand. They don't work at cross purposes if they're used properly.
Bill, that's great. Yeah, great summary, I think, of where we're at with this. And I appreciate your time. We got to go. We're at the end of our half hour here, a fast half hour for us today. But thanks again for joining us. We want to bring you back and talk to you some more at a later date and explore these issues with you. So thanks again
It was great to be with you.
Yeah, we really appreciate you joining us this afternoon. And like I say, we'll see you down the road.
Okay, thanks. Have a nice weekend.
You too.
So long.
Bye.
He made an important point there, is very often the critics of, and not that people shouldn't be critical of any program. But very often I think they do kind of set up a straw man argument based on their perception of well, this is what Six Sigma is, or this is what design for Six Sigma is, and then proceed to shoot it down. Only makes sense if that is how you perceive it to be implemented or how you perceive it to be used. And we've talked about this before. Six Sigma is so broad now that it can be almost anything can be called Six Sigma now in a way, and so it really depends how you set it up.
And what do we always end up saying at the end of these types of pieces? It's a tool.
It's a tool.
It's one of too many tools. You can't be in a debate about quality without people getting passionate about it. But you have to understand that tools are tools. They're meant to be used. You use them as you see fit. You don't have to drink the Kool-Aid for the whole thing, but there's certainly some elements of that might be of value. So consider that when you're looking at Six Sigma next time. Absolutely. All right, well, we got to run. That's been our show. But before we close, I want to thank today's sponsor of the show, TÜV Südamerika. Learn more about the benefits of FSC COC certification and how your company can contribute to responsible, sustainable foresting practices. Sign up for TÜV Südamerika's free webinar, Forest Stewardship Council Chain of Custody, at www.tuvamerica.com/FSCCOC, or a little easier. Click on the banner just below or just to the right.
That's much easier.
The player page right there.
Okay, next week, watch for the Knowledge at Wharton piece featuring the CEO of Hyatt talking about how to quantify customer satisfaction. And a lot of you will remember that Hyatt has actually done some great stuff in terms of customer satisfaction
really
as well.
Interesting. You know, that's not an easy thing to quantify, and this piece talks
particularly
about,
in what do they call it, the hospitality industry.
The hospitality industry. It's really tough.
Cranky people in the hospitality industry.
And the metrics are not easy to peer into, but this is some interesting comments on this. So look out for that one next week in QD Day.
So it's a great customer satisfaction piece.
That's right.
Don't miss it.
Okay. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks again for joining us, all of you. Dirk, thank you for joining us. Adrian Vido, thank you.
And thank you to all you bosses out there.
That's right, all you bosses. Bill Hathaway of MoreSteam as well. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us on the show. And again, we'll see you next week with a week of QDD and next Friday here on QDL.
So long.
See ya.
Automotive.